Okay.
So Tracy, so the whole idea of this podcast, and it's going to be it'll go out to a whole bunch of podiatrists. I think there's maybe, I don't know, 300 on my list right now.
Wow, nice.
And it's the podcast or the site is called Podiatry Practice Mastery.
I saw that.
And so I just kind of document like the almost like the learning pains I'm having. And if I'm struggling with it, I'm sure like a lot of other people are struggling with stuff.
Sure. Yeah. That's
And
fine.
so
Good.
we're gonna talk a little bit. Now you work for Forward Motion, which is another orthotic company named before it was called Forward Motion, right?
Yeah, before we started the custom lab, it was JM Orthotics.
JM Orthotics. Okay.
Yeah. So, and they just did prefabs. So when I moved to Utah, then that's when we started the custom lab.
Okay. And what's cool about you guys, just in my opinion, because there's a lot of like most of the listeners here are probably third-year residents or like just younger docs. Like everyone likes the high tech. So like I think your secret sauce is your scanner.
Yeah, I agree.
Like that's the secret sauce, because I think orthotics are all pretty similar, but the secret sauce is the scanner, and that's all kind of, I don't know who else is listening to it, but we used a different lab before, and the main reason we switched is because their scanner, I had to be like 20 feet away to scan, and it just wasn't a good scanner.
Right.
And so on my staff can literally do it in like 10 seconds. I'm amazed. Like I tried to do it and I can't do it. My staff can do it.
Well, it was a good thing for us when we started using this scanner. We found out about structure, and so we tested their scanner, and it was like when we first got it, it was made for like interior designers and people like that would use it, and they would go into a house and scan the house to get like measurements of everything. So when they were doing remodeling or, decorating, they would know how big everything was. So we contacted Structure. We were the first lab to really contact Structure. And so we were fortunate that they were willing to work with us like a partner as far as how their scanner works and how we could get our programmers to go in there and fine tune everything. Because when we first started using it, it was like accurate to like 2 or 3 millimeters, where now it's down into the, micrometers. It's that accurate. So,
wow.
Yeah. So, and I was, an old school guy, plaster cast and all that. And, and I'd seen other scanners come along, and, they were okay, but they just weren't like, to me, as precise as what I was happy with. And so once we got going and started using it, once the doctors got the hang of everything you needed to capture, and that our adjustment rate for scans is lower than any other type of casting that we make. So
good. So let me now, this isn't just this isn't an ad for you, Tracy. You're not paying me anything. So I'm going to ask my questions now, so you can give me, so I can do more orthotics. Okay.
Sure. All right.
Let me tell you my questions here. One of my main things is I still have patients, even this or my other one, and they complain that sometimes they're too rigid, and they look at like the ones that the chiropractors give them, those real cushiony ones, sole supports, and they say, yours are so rigid. What do you say to that? Now I kind of have a spiel like, the rigidity is good. It's like walking on something that's going to give you more support versus the sand and the beach. Do you have any, should I keep doing rigid ones, or is there any reason to do more of a top cover with more cushion and stuff?
Well, I guess it depends on what the diagnosis is. I prefer more rigid orthotics with plantar fasciitis, those type of things, heel pain, things associated with plantar fasciitis. A lot of times with people with like flexible flat feet, pes varus and valgus, and the ones that are collapsing a lot, I try to steer away from something really rigid, just because they're not used to having something like that underneath their arch. And so sometimes it's hard for them to tolerate. And especially if you're looking at something with a lot of control, like with medial flanges, adding those flanges adds rigidity to the shell. So a lot of times you can get away with like using a more semi-rigid if you're going to incorporate those flanges, especially high flanges. And I think that you'll find a lot of times patients tolerate those better. Also, like with a cavus type of foot, most of those people, same thing, they're not used to anything being there. And so, and also the higher the arch on the orthotic, the more rigid it's going to make it. So you can get away the same thing using a less rigid material, and that sometimes that will help with with their compliance as far as like how it feels on their foot. So, and these are just kind of rules of thumb. I had a cavus patient the other day, and he insisted that we make rigid orthotics, and we did, and he was very happy with the outcome. So these things are just kind of like rules of thumb. I can't say that they're 100% successful for every case that you run across like this, but for the most part, I guess I would explain it to them that, like you were speaking about those other type of orthotics, those mostly aren't made to a corrected cast. Those are kind of like a cookie cutter thing that they just glue all these pads on. And so what they're getting is a true custom orthotic that has been corrected to whatever their foot can, whatever they measure, we measure at the lab, that there is correction involved in there. So it won't feel the way that those kind of orthotics do, because you're really, especially you started getting more rigid, the functional styles, they're called functionals because they are going to affect the function of the foot.
Something. So, yeah. So Tracy, I'm just going to cut you off because we only have half hour here.
Sure.
You're going to rant on for an hour.
Yeah, it's easy for me to do.
So I'm going to guide you.
Sure.
Second question. A lot of us, I think I use I have these standard ones, and I use the same one over and over and over and over again. Is that what most doctors do? Like we just, are 80% of pretty much exactly the same, and then they do a couple of outliers. Is that what most of us do?
Yeah. I for the most part, yeah. And to me, that's fine. If you find something that works, then that's what works. So, because you can order a pair of orthotics 20 different ways. Like, you can order a functional, but make it out of a material that's not really a functional style, right? So, yeah, that's a very common thing, like you said, and they'll have their go-to, and then, okay, I have this patient, so I'm going to order a little something different, or they need to get in dressier shoes, so I'm going to order a dress style.
Yeah, I have a standard one that we use. It's like and I just kind of make some tweaks on it. It's actually my one of the other docs, Dr. Saviat, he put it together, and it's just the one that we use over and over, and so there's no problem with that. That just makes it easier for us. The question is, how sophisticated or complex should we be getting about orthotics? Like, and this is, I know it sounds dumb, but I find the more complex, the more I feel like I make mistakes.
Yeah.
And the simpler I do it, like the standard, a regular heat DPL seat, semi-rigid, full length, with a nice vinyl top cover, like that works for like 80 or 90% of my patients. When like are there certain people that are getting really, really complex and like doing like a super DPL cup and varus and valgus wedge for every single orthotic they're doing for the complexities like that?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same mind as you, Dr. Pelto. To me, I think you start out simple, and then, if they've got like things that need like 4-foot accommodations or some extra cushion or something like that, that's pretty standard stuff. But when you start getting into, like I said, the flexible flat feet, I like to do Kirby Skives and things like that on them. But for the most part, to me, I like to start out simple, keep it conservative. Most doctors have felt pads and that type of thing in their office, where if they were unsure at first, if you need to add like a Metapad or some type of offloading there, that you can add those pads in your office then, right? And then that way it gives you a good idea of exactly what works for that patient, what feels good. Then you send them back and we incorporate all of that into it. But probably, most of the time, you don't really have to do anything. So yeah, I think sometimes you try to some doctors try to get a little too imaginative and creative. And so to me, I'm a big believer in let's start out conservative, get a baseline, and if we need to go from there, we can.
Yeah, Tracy, the way I kind of think about it, I think I start with a simple device and then I add on to it. So I have the base device, and we'll start with the back because I find the rear foot a little bit more challenging for me, and that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Okay. So for some of the patients, for example, if they have a really high arched cavus foot, or a really like a flexible flat foot or a rigid flat foot, I get a little confused when I add like a Kirby skive or when I do like a 3 or 4 degree rear foot valgus or varus, a rear foot varus. Like, and then when do I add both of them together? Like sometimes, and I'm very random. So is there some rule of thumbs? Do you add a skive with a rear foot varus, or like what do you recommend?
Well, usually like on the flexible flat feet type of foot, I don't really recommend any extrinsic degrees. I usually try to treat those just with Kirby skives, just for the fact of when you just do it on the extrinsic rear foot post, as soon as they go through heel strike, they're pronating right through that rear foot posting. So, they're already flattening out and there's a lot of pronation, motion going on in that foot. So for me, I like to keep the shell stable on those type of feet where the Kirby skive will still address the rear foot deformity. But as they go through their gait, they're not going to pronate through it. There's not going to be any more motion added to that foot. And so I think I found that a lot of times that's an effective way to approach those. With the cavus feet,
well, let's go back. Let's talk more about the flexible. Would you also add like a medial flange on that as well?
Yes, I like to do like the mild flanges. You can go as high as you want. Sometimes what you run into is those type of feet have dropped naviculars. So we'll end up having to do some type of pocketing in the flange to make sure when that drops down, it's not going to hit the top of the flange or the shell, right? Because the way those feet spread out, that's a possibility.
And then how about for the heel cup? When would I put them in a deep heel cup to get more stability? Like when do you use that deep one?
Yes, I would definitely do a deep heel cup with that. To me, anytime you have a Kirby skive, it's nice to add more material around the edge of the heel, just so that way you're getting more control. They're not going to slide over and out of that
Anything else that you would add that I didn't think of?
For those type of feet, that would be it. And with the flanges, I like the flanges because they're not going to pronate over the side of the orthotic. And so I would at least try to get a wide grind. I know sometimes with some patients, they're more concerned about shoe fit really than they are about the actual orthotic itself. And so if you have a patient like that, you just kind of have to try to do the best you can with what you're working with, right?
Now, what happens if it's like, I can understand a flexible flat foot. How about if it's more of a rigid flat foot? They have this PTTD that's arthritic and they're just super flat and it's not, you can't lift it up. Yeah. What type of arch height? What you do everything the same except you just lower the arch instead of doing like
and I would probably recommend a more flexible material on those, especially with the arthritic foot, and then try to go with a more cushiony top cover as well.
So more like a semi-rigid or a semi-flex? I've never done.
Yeah. Depending on the weight, if they're a size 13 shoe and weigh 250, I probably wouldn't go semi-flexible. But you could add like some type of mild arch reinforcement, Poron or EVA, and that would help stiffen it up a little bit. But usually with the more rigid ones, especially when you throw on those other conditions, when you start trying to get really controlling, sometimes it's not easy for them to tolerate that.
Okay. Yeah, because that's the thing. The main thing I look at it, like if the heel's rectus, then now with neither of these, do I have to really post the heel then? Do I post it? Do I just do a Kirby skive in both of those and not post it?
That's what I would do. If their heel's pretty rectus, I probably wouldn't even mess around with the Kirby skive, right? I mean, you can look at their shoe wear, how that looks with the lateral sides all worn down and everything. If you see those indicators, that's when I start looking at doing that rear foot control that way.
So when would I post varus?
Well, to me, that's okay to do. Like if you've got,
Like never, you can say never.
well, I'm not a real big one on extrinsic degrees, okay? I
Okay.
mean, I understand the reasoning behind it, but to me, it's you're fighting pronation by trying to add that. But then it's like I said, as soon as you go through heel strike, you're really adding more pronation forces to that orthotic because they're going to pronate right through that and the shell's going to flatten out. So to me, I prefer a more stable shell. So if you've got somebody that's maybe like a runner with a lot of rear foot valgus, that would be a good thing. But the other drawback to doing like extrinsic varus is like let's say you've got somebody, you see that, then when they're standing, like if they work at a warehouse or something like that, they're standing all day, a lot. Um, you're inverting that foot when they're not doing anything, right? So their natural stance is going to be affected by that posting. So 4 degrees is about the limit I prefer on those type of things. To me, if you start getting really high extrinsic rear foot postings like that, to me, it's just there's other more efficient ways to do it than
And
that.
then in terms of the curvy skive, do you typically do like a 4 millimeter curvy skive? And then when do you use a pronation?
That would be like for normal. To me, if they're really flexible and really flat, then I would go 6. I've done them all the way up to 20 millimeters. So it just depends on the how advanced it is. And so but I wouldn't recommend 20 millimeters for 99% of the patients, right? Like I said, to me, it's like if it's bad, 6 degrees is good or 6 millimeters is good. And then the 4 millimeters would be like for, regular, I guess.
And I've never used the pronation skive. Do I need to use that?
No, I've never recommended one either. I don't get the point of posting in Varus and then putting a pronation skive. So you're basically saying, well, I just want them to pronate right through it. Well, I understand the principles behind it, but I don't understand the real world application, like what that adds to the function of the orthotic.
Okay. Good. No, this is good. Let's move on to, I think we talked about everything with the flat foot stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now, oh yeah, in terms of arch height, most of mine just do medium. Everyone does medium. And then if they're, when do you do low or high? I never really, or
Yeah,
even
well, I
lower.
probably wouldn't recommend low on those type of feet because they flatten out so much anyway, right? And so sometimes even when you're scanning them, the arches will be really low. So to me, I like to try to get the arch up there. And so medium is good. That's where we would lower from whatever the arch height measures. We would add like, imagine a plaster cast. We would add 4 millimeters in the arch to lower it that much. Then that way it's going to kind of be less aggressive as far as the way it feels on their foot. So to me, a medium is a good way to start.
And then, so medium, and then, so when do you use for Cavis, do you use a high or do you do no contact or no arch?
Well, to me, I like to do high or medium on Cavis just for the fact of, like I said, they're not used to anything touching their, if they've got a rigid Cavis foot, I probably wouldn't go total contact just because I found in most instances that's really it irritates them. They're not used to having that kind of pressure on their arch, right? So for me, the same thing. I would go medium or high. It'll be good enough to give them some support, and but you're not going to be like pushing right up on their foot. And if it's not so much of a rigid Cavis, the way most Cavis feet are that way, they're pretty rectus and they're pretty rigid. So but they're not all that way. So yeah, and then that's another one that I don't really use a lot of really rigid shells for those type of feet either.
So more semi-rigid or
yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
And something else on Cavis feet is this is a very common thing too, just because of their foot structure. They hit on the ball of their feet, they go down the lateral edge of their feet, and then they hit the forefoot. Then they're meta heads. where there's not very much pronation at all. So they tend to supinate a lot. So I always recommend, especially if you see like Taylor's bunions or calluses under the fifth, that's kind of a good indication of adding like our lateral wedge that we do to those, because it's not really going to pronate the foot very much, but it adds a lot of stabilization, and it seems to kind of keep them from supinating a lot. It's, that's basically what they're for, just to like stabilize that lateral side, not so much as put like valgus posting and pronate them.
Now, is that a lateral flange? Is that what you mean?
They're called lateral wedges, and it's like underneath our rear foot posting on our order form. And it's just like a 2-degree posting strip. We put it down the entire lateral border under the heel of the under the heel of the orthotic. It runs down the entire lateral border of the shell itself. So then that way, then it's going to stabilize through the whole gait. It won't, if you just try to do like a 2 or 3 degree rear foot post, same thing. They're going to hit heel strike, and then they're just going to supinate out of that rear foot post. And so to me, I found the lateral wedges to be really effective at stabilizing those type of feet.
That's awesome. No, I think that's really good. And I think the forefoot, I feel pretty confident, about when to use, metatarsal cutouts and met pads, and the Cluffy wedge we use a lot for hallux limitus and, things like that. Let's talk a little bit about, you do a lot of orthotics there.
Yeah.
Who are the providers? I know a lot of the younger ones listening, they want to do more orthotics. So any tips of how, because I think you need to learn more. And I've asked you guys this before, you haven't done it yet, but I've asked you guys to put together some type of a training course or orthotic specific course. I know some other labs have that.
Yeah.
But how do people learn to do more and do more of them? I think people are sometimes like scared, or they're like offering over the counter and they don't know how to do that switch from over the counter and good shoes to an orthotic. Do you have any tips for that?
Yeah, well, Dr. Pelto, I have made my videos. I don't know if the sales department has posted them yet, but we've addressed like the first videos we did were basically, like what is the most frequently asked questions. And so
if you send me that link, I'll add it to this podcast.
Okay. And so, for like accommodations and things like that. So I guess that to answer that question is that especially with younger doctors, I know they don't really get the kind of orthotic training, the older guy,
We don't get any.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be the guys getting out of school would go work with a dude that had like a grinder and a little lab in the closet, and he would make orthotics. And so they would learn the basics of orthotics just from that, where now, it's changed so much that doctors don't have their own little labs.
But we have a grinder, but I think a lot of them starting out, they don't know how to do that transition. Well, you say, you try over the counter, and then to make that switch to custom, I think a lot of us, we struggle with, like, do you just offer it to everyone? How do you decide who to offer it to? What happens if it doesn't work? Why? Things like that.
Well, a lot of it, I think a lot of doctors go by what the patient, with insurance or things like that, or their ability to pay, if they feel, they talk to them about customs, and then the patient's like, oh, I really don't know if I can afford that, then, then go. And, sometimes just using a prefab is going to work well enough, right? And so, so that one there, and then I guess I always encourage our younger doctors too, that, I feel good that they have a resource at the lab, like me or Eli.
That's a good idea.
That don't ever hesitate to call your lab about something that you don't understand, because I always tell them that I'd rather spend 5 or 10 minutes on the phone than hours remaking something, or, and then plus that, after they get a feel for the different diagnosis and the different treatments that we offer for that kind of builds their confidence then and going down the road, like, oh yeah, this is just like Janet that was in here a month ago. And so I feel pretty good about, what I should be doing. So I would always say, take advantage of your lab's resources. And most labs have somebody there that is experienced enough to kind of help guide you through the basics until you can really get a good
Yeah.
understanding.
Well, good, Tracy. I think so. I'm going to include a link underneath here of some of those videos once you guys get those. And the only
Sure.
thing I would say, and this is more like practice management, I don't think we can rely on patients because, for example, where I live in Massachusetts, insurance just doesn't cover. And
Right.
so if I only gave them to those that would cover it, no, I wouldn't do any orthotics.
Right.
But and also I think we have to kind of guide them. For some patients, they just need orthotics, like they've
Yes.
tried the
Right.
other ones, and then the next step is to do a custom. That conversation, I've heard some good tips. One of the tips is saying we're going to prescribe the orthotic. So
Yes.
saying, just like any other prescription.
Yes.
Another thing that works well for us is we have our staff, I go over the orthotics and my staff comes in and closes them and basically talks about the price. So I don't have to deal with that price.
Right. Right.
Because that can be a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is the confidence of the doctor. And this is where I think
Yes.
it's important. If you get used to doing them and you have a good lab and you have good results with them, you're going to be much more confident. It's kind of like if someone comes in with an ingrown toenail and they say, well, I think I should just try to tape down the side. You know that you need to take that edge out.
Right.
That's what's the best thing for them. And so the thing is we have to get so confident doing these that we know that orthotics are the best thing. And I think that's where we struggle, or I struggle, is like, is it really the best thing for them right now, or would something else work? And that's the whole challenge. Yeah.
Well, to me, it's a big quality of life issue. I've had patients that were pretty much unable to work. They just couldn't stand on their feet all day, and we'll work with them, get them some good orthotics. Next thing you know, they're working full time at a warehouse, right? And you weren't going to get that with a prefab kind of device, right? So there is definite value in custom orthotics that if once you're comfortable with your diagnosis and how you're going to approach that with the orthotic, that it can really affect a person's life, and so to me, that's a big deal that, they get home, their feet don't hurt, they want to go out and play with their kids now, they want to do more things, right? I work with a doctor and he's got a saying, steps for life. The more steps that you can get out and take, the more active you are, the better quality of life you'll have, and probably you will live longer than people that are more sentient, right?
That's
and
good.
So that is a good selling point to me.
Okay, very good. Hey, well, I appreciate your time, Tracy, and we'll do it again next time. If we get some good questions, we'll do it again.
Sure. Yeah, that would be fine. If anybody that watches your videos would like to address anything, just let me know. I'm happy to, go over anything that they would have concerns about or questions about. And I'll get with Gage and we'll get you some links to those videos for you. Okay.
Great. Thanks, Tracy. Have a good
one.
one.
All right, Dr. Pelto, good talking to you. Take care.